Okay, in this recording, we are going to briefly discuss our focus for Struck by Hazard. Just wanted to go over, you have to review everything within the module, follow all of the steps, and be prepared to take the very detailed test. So what is a struck by event? So struck by injuries are produced by, let me turn that down, forcible contact or impact between the injured person and the object. So, or the piece of equipment. Could be a piece of equipment. It's important to note that in construction, struck by events can resemble caught in or between hazards. So you know it's how the injury occurred for those other situations, and you've already gone over that. Caught in between, caught in or caught in between. We won't review that. Okay. And so OSHA categorizes some of these struck by events. So struck by flying object, struck by falling object, struck by swinging object, and struck by rolling object. So those are some of the hazards. And you always have to think when you're thinking about OSHA, it's always what's the hazard related to that thing or that category, and how do we prevent that? So if you think about a struck by flying object, well, first things we need to do is always to make sure that our head is covered. Okay, and so, when I think about struck by flying objects or falling, all the objects, we want to, what's the best thing that we can do to secure an object, causing damage to the most sensitive parts of our body? Well, our head and our feet, right? So we make sure that we are wearing proper gear on our head and on our feet. And if we're using our hands for some portion of construction, which we do, right? Then we're wearing gloves and the proper type of glove for the proper situation. So, okay, so struck by falling object, yeah, head, protect yourself. Swinging object, we're thinking maybe cranes. So what's the, that in construction, that's typically what would swing something attached to a crane or whatever. And so what are the rules and guidelines with respect to cranes? And so we'll learn that too. And what rolls, cars, right? Struck by rolling object. So you can assume that some of your preventative measures in this struck by category of the focus 4, fatal 4, will include information about vehicles and things that roll, like vehicles and forklifts and, all of that. Power industrial vehicles. Okay, and so that is the struck by category. And just to go over a little bit of what some of the struck by training would involve. Okay, and so struck by flying object. So they give some possible situations. So power, actuated tools, and compressed air. Those are some of the hazards. So if you're using powder, actuated tools, yeah, if you're not using those properly, you could get struck by a flying object. If you're not using compressed air properly. Okay, and so there are standards related to that, and that's what we'll have to make sure you know where to go and what the standard, what the number is. Okay, and so just in the case of powder actuated tools, they're particularly dangerous, okay, due to the force that's used and the force behind the fastener. Those fasteners can go through walls and hit people. Okay, and so yes, we're going to have some specific standards related to that. Okay, and there's a standard for compressed air. Okay, because when using compressed air, you can cause objects to fly. Okay, and so, it's commonly used, right, to power tools. So you want to make sure in those situations you're using it properly and, in some cases to clean surfaces. So, all right. So, struck by falling objects, some of the things you'll have to review: collapsing materials and structures. Okay, and struck by swinging object, swinging loads, and mechanical lifts. Those are the hazards related to that. And let's go, and of course, rolling objects, rollover vehicles. Okay, so in the struck by training, you have cranes and excavators. Okay, so safety when using heavy equipment, that will be something you have to review. And there are quite a few standards. Okay. Stay clear of lifting loads. Do not carry personnel unless there's a safe place to ride. Do not exceed a vehicle's rated load or lift capacity. All of these things have a standard number, and then the most important ones I'm going to ask you to tell me what they are. We also have vehicle safety, and then general work safe work practices. That's part of that training. When working with hand tools, when working with compressed air. Okay, so for instance, reduce air pressure to 30 psi. If used in cleaning, and use only with appropriate guarding and proper protective equipment. There's a standard for that. There's a number related to that. Okay, because when they see you doing that on the job site and they cite you, they're going to use that number to say, well, you did not, or you did, or you didn't use it in this way. Okay, so you got to go over all of that. And part of this portion is the personal protective equipment, PPE, and choosing the right PPE. Okay, and also always, what's the employer's responsibility with respect to heavy equipment? Okay, and remember, we're going back to the focus 4, struck by hazards. So OSHA has determined that the focus 4 struck by hazards include operations that would include heavy equipment, motor vehicles. You will have some general requirements in terms of just general day-to-day operations on the basic operations on the day-to-day basis. Knowing how to select the proper PPE, even though PPE has a separate class, which we'll go over separately, but that is part of the training that they have decided goes with the struck by. And then, of course, you always have to train your employees on how to not have a struck by event. Okay, so make sure you follow all of the links for all of the sections, and always in your mind, what's the hazard? What's the procedure OSHA has described to help me eliminate the hazard? And what is the employer's responsibilities and requirements? Those are always going to be the 3 things you need to always think about with respect to every topic in OSHA. What's the hazard? What's the prevention? What's my employer's responsibilities? Okay, and so review that in total, take the test, and please don't go to the next module until you get certification from me that you have passed.